Nebraska pulls together as farm families deal with difficult conditions. Blizzards, flooding, and more. We see how Nebraska ranch and farm families are coping. Plus, months after the president's announcement on ethanol, we're getting our first look at the fine print. And we wrap up National Egg Week visiting with Governor Ricketts. It's time to grow. Farm families pray for relief as nature unleashes a fury. Floods, blizzard, and more. Through it all, Nebraska's farm families put on their muck boots and get to work. A bridge to nowhere. With no more barricades to be found, Jack Reimers used a livestock trailer to keep people away.
We have a bridge washed out here by town, and ice, or some pastures we have a lot of ice in them now.
Todd Mader of Grand Island couldn't believe this video a friend sent.
Really unbelievable.
Showing a feedlot underwater. Meanwhile, he got a late-night call of his own.
Rang about 3 different times, and my wife finally got up and got it, and it was the 911 center just trying to get a hold of me, saying we had some additional flooding going on, and I had cattle in the area. And
his cattle are high and dry for now.
Just get them away from the creek, basically, as far as we can. And luckily, we had 6 or 8 big hay bales up here that were not necessarily for them, but they found on that night of the blizzard.
In Wood River, a family scrambled to save their home, plus chickens, sheep, and goats.
We want to take care of everything.
Firefighters delivered dozens of sandbags.
It's been crazy and overwhelming the past few hours, and as you can see, the river is right back here, a few feet from our home. First the cold, now blizzards and flooding. It's a punch in the gut to those who make their living on the land.
Not that I'm a huge cattle farmer, but we have 50 or 60 head, and it's been by far the most challenging winter I've dealt with. It's just kind of a grind, and I guess you got to kind of love what you're doing.
That water too much for dams like the one in Ord. These are pictures sent to us by viewer Don Proskachil. He described the scene on his property near the river.
There has to be several inches, maybe even as much as a foot of water flowing over the entire thing. I have some livestock out there, some horses that we've been feeding in a particular area with hay bales, and it's kind of built up a little dome. That's where they are residing at the time, trying to stay out of the water. It's kind of a scary sight, actually.
Don adds the river looked nasty, but they made it. More now on the flooding impact on agriculture from our sister station, KPTM.
Overflow from the Missouri River flooded Gifford Farms and inspired dozens of community volunteers to spring into action to help the animals trapped by the floodwaters.
This flood hit so many people by surprise as far as how bad it was. I mean, I'm sure everybody in this community knows somebody that is affected and had to evacuate like that.
What was once a road looked more like a river Thursday, a chilly reminder of how quickly trouble can set in. The people who run Gifford Farms in Bellevue rushed as many of their horses to safety Thursday as they could. Volunteers had to come back in boats for the chickens.
Boating back up this road and seeing volunteers with towels to dry off our chickens was just awesome. The community support and response has just been overwhelming.
But things quickly got worse.
We came back down for round 2, and I would say the water quadrupled from what we've seen. And it was too dangerous to go through the currents.
They had to leave animals behind, but workers did open up gates in hopes that they'd be able to make it to higher ground.
We were so hopeful that we could rescue what we had left, because it's a much better day than yesterday was. But unfortunately, we did not find any animals. I still have hope. You know, if you see any farm animals running loose in Bellevue, please call us.
Volunteers say they plan to continue monitoring water levels, and as soon as things dry up, they hope to rebuild later this year. Reporting at Gifford Farms, Sidney Holzfaster, Fox News.
All of that water coming when we didn't need it. Producers anxious to get in the field, but conditions certainly not good. Here's a look from before the flooding from NTV's Sidney Edwards.
With weather the way it's been, many producers are expecting a late planting season, which could eventually lead to a late harvest.
No rain, a lot of sunlight, and just a slight breeze. If we can get all that, that'd be great, but the forecast isn't looking too promising.
Snow is melting, causing ice jams across the state and issues for ag. Corn and soybean farmer Aaron Kowalski says he doesn't want any more moisture. He expects parts of his land to turn into more of a swamp than a grassland once things start to really thaw.
Over there's our pasture, and right now the sloughs aren't really flowing or anything, but as soon as the ground starts to thaw and everything like that, it'll pretty much be an active stream. I would imagine with the amount of moisture we have, it'll be going for a while.
Kowalski says if the weather permits, they hope to start planting the second week of April. But he says that timeline seems a bit optimistic. Kowalski says this isn't his first time dealing with oversaturated fields.
In the past, when we've had really wet springs, we'll run our vertical till disc across it, which helps air out the top, which at least allows you to get into the field, but you're pretty much at the mercy of the elements.
In other parts of the state, jams are forming near the Platte River and whole fields have turned into puddles. Hall County Emergency Manager John Rosenlund says they haven't had any damage yet, but he still cautions folks against flooded areas.
We always encourage everyone to avoid flood-prone areas. Never drive across a road or a bridge that is covered with water. You're really not sure that there's a solid roadway or a bridge underneath that water.
Rosenlund says they encourage everyone to follow the mantra, turn around, don't drown. Sidney Edwards, NTV News, Grand Island.
March is normally the best month for calving, but certainly not this year. According to Tyler Williams of Nebraska Extension, if you look at 30 years of data, March is probably the best month for that farm activity because of strong warming and drying trends. This year appears to be an outlier, showing the extremes. Tyler's data shows some areas have 20 inches of snow more than normal for the season, and temps in February were well below average, with the Comfort Cattle Index in the extreme category, and that's before all the flooding. Extension has been working with the Farm Service Agency to see if there are livestock losses that could meet the criteria for the Livestock Indemnity Program. And our question of the week, regardless of what you think of climate change, do you think our weather has become more extreme? Follow NTV Screw on Twitter to weigh in. Months after the president's announcement on ethanol, the Trump administration follows through. The EPA proposal released this week fulfills a pledge that President Donald Trump made to U.S. corn farmers. Oil refineries have been seeking exemptions from government requirements to include ethanol in their fuel mixes. Beyond increasing the amount of ethanol allowed in vehicle fuel, the EPA is proposing regulatory changes to the ethanol program. We reached out to Scott McFeeters from the Nebraska Ethanol Board, and he didn't hold back his feelings on moving forward.
We're glad the administration is moving forward with this rulemaking process, and in fact, the proposal was just issued this afternoon. It is 175 pages, so we're still reviewing that. And as you know, the details are always critical, and the petroleum industry is working to keep us out of the market. The more we can use here in our own state, the better. It gives us clean air, and so we're wanting to bring this onto the market to give us another market for our corn and help counteract the cyclical nature of our business.
And now there's been talks of a June 1st deadline the EPA faces to secure year-round E15 sales, which McFeeters expects progress to come down by the end of the month.
We are cautiously optimistic, and the Nebraska Ethanol Board will testify in a public hearing on March 29th and submit written comments by April 29th. And we're working closely with the governor's office and other state agencies just to ensure that all retailers with blender pumps in Nebraska can sell their E15 this summer.
The EPA proposal released this week fulfills a pledge that President Donald Trump made to U.S. corn farmers. Oil refineries have been seeking exemptions from government requirements to include ethanol in their fuel mixes. Beyond increasing the amount of ethanol allowed in vehicle fuel, the EPA is proposing regulatory changes to the ethanol program. Next, a special tribute to farm and ranch families dealing with this difficult weather. And later, Kent talks to Governor Pete Ricketts about the weather.